I'm Brian Cobb, Chief Innovation Officer for the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport. That's quite a mouthful. For those of you that are not familiar with Cincinnati, some stats behind me, fast-growing Midwest area. So very fortunate in the part of the country that we're located and the facilities that we have, very well positioned for tremendous growth. The backstory to the airport environment is who has flown through Cincinnati in the past? All right, if you have flown through about 10 years ago, quite a bit of difference. Once upon a time, we were a hub market for a major carrier in the US. Post-recession, the floor dropped out, frankly, to the entire community. So essentially, what we had to do was reinvent ourselves, what that means to us. So you see 9 million. At the top, at the pinnacle of what we were at one point, we had 22 million passengers going through our facility, quite a bit of change, right? However, what we have learned during that time, culturally, regionally, what the expectation is that we have to reinvent ourselves, much like any other organization or company throughout the world. Periodically take that pulse check, anticipate what's happening in the marketplace, and then subsequently adjust, course correct, and move forward. That's where we're going today, where experience is at the core for everything we do, X-Core. Of course, we have to start out with a quote. Again, if you don't do anything, does it really ever make an impact? And again, that's the critical aspect of where we're going today. Now, how many of you, as I wander through the crowd, feel something? What's the emotion that you feel?
Like
at this present moment?
Chilliness.
Chilliness. What else? Excitement is nice, thank you.
Nervousness.
Perfect. Nervousness. Put yourself in the position of any individual that's using our product or service. If they're unfamiliar with our product or service, immediately the anxiety level goes up. We don't do well with anxiety, do we? Culturally, it's a challenge. It's the fear of the unknown. It's what should I anticipate next? And in the absence of information, our beautiful mind starts creating all sorts of different scenarios. Airports are no different, right? And our primary mission is to support airlines who in turn support our mutual customers. How do we develop an environment where we are putting the information directly into the customer's hands and allowing them to be empowered for the decision-making on their own and make the course correction that they want to do, and ultimately curate an experience that all of us would expect. None of us like queue lines. So let's talk about a few deployment elements that we have going on at Cincinnati that make this work. Now we're jumping into the Internet of Things, IoT. What are we doing specifically in a relatively small Midwest town that is making a difference culturally for not only our airport, but across the world, and ideally for multiple airports around the globe to traditionally make an impact for that queue that we all despise. None of us want to wait in line. The first one, Blip Tract. And Blip Tract was our venture into the space for security in about 2012. And essentially, it is no different than a sniffer. It is a Wi-Fi Bluetooth sniffer. So we have nodes throughout the entire security process that is sniffing for any device that you have that has Bluetooth or Wi-Fi enabled. We don't know who you are. We're not really interested right now in who you are, but we just want to know where your blip is in the airport space. Rapidly, we were the first airport that worked through this technology and deployed it in the United States. And immediately, the selfish interest was we already had tremendous backup queues at our security checkpoint. And oh, by the way, we only had one carrier going through that one checkpoint that was brand new. Very frustrating in the fact that you have a gorgeous facility and it's not functioning to where it needs to be. And oh, by the way, in that time, what was TSA doing? TSA was changing protocols pretty much every other month. We needed a tool that was flexible, and more importantly, we needed a tool that we could hold TSA and ourselves accountable for the product delivery that we were navigating through. So the backstory to this technology is really it was designed for retail. It was selfishly interested in, as you were shopping in a store, what were you standing in front of? The chocolates or the alcohol? And if more people were standing in front of the chocolates, then you add more chocolates. We just transitioned that technology into our airport space to help with security queues. We took that data subsequently. We improved the process by giving it to the TSA. We immediately give them the opportunity to receive alerts on their phones for the leadership that says, queue times are going up, queue times are going up, queue times are going up. What are you going to do about it? And immediately, the challenges that we saw across the country just 2 years ago, and many of you were probably mixed up in that mess. 2 years ago, if you were flying through Denver, Seattle, Chicago, you may have been in a security wait line 2, sometimes 3 hours. We were able to mitigate and totally eliminate that experience. Why? Because we took data from phones, encapsulated it, and sat down with our friends at the TSA that says, this is how we really need to do business. And immediately they adjusted their staffing to course correct. The next one, a little company called Losance. It's local. You can hardly see it, but it is a printed sniffer, basically. Again, they printed it in their office. It's maybe the size of this clicker. And essentially, that device gives a heartbeat to an inanimate object. And we'll take the train, for example. We have 2 passenger trains. That technology was deployed over 30 years ago, well before the computers that we have today. And really, the signage above it is very static, very dated, and frankly, it looks like a dot matrix printer. It's very confusing for our new passenger base. And when we talked about that connection traffic before in that major hub environment, traditionally, in the past, that train really wasn't terribly important because passengers would arrive in one concourse, hop on the train, and immediately go to the next concourse. The bulk of our traffic, 80%, 85, 90% of our traffic was connecting traffic. They were just going to the next aircraft. However, because of our market change, now we have over 90% of our traffic is coming through the front door. An entirely new demographic, frankly, that's not familiar with the airport space. And they see a train, and immediately, if you see a train, you must think to yourself, that's got to be a long walk. So do I take the train, or do I take the walkway? And if I take the walkway, how much or how long is it going to take me? What we are able to do is update that technology simply by putting a device on an inanimate object on the wall that just checks, where's the train at along the way? And immediately we start collecting data on the train system. And subsequent to that, we can push it to a new display. The interest and the selfish interest on our part is, like many of us, we can go to the market. We can find an off-the-shelf market solution. And that's what we did in this situation. And we also were quoted about $350,000 for a startup, just to install the initial wave. However, we shifted gears. We went a different startup way. We went truly to a startup company and said, give us a solution. What can you come up with? $20,000 later, we have a solution that never could have anticipated. So we didn't need all of the bells and whistles of what the New York subway transit system offers. We have 2 trains, simple system, printed literally in their office. Next scenario, restrooms. We are all judged by our restrooms, hotels, airports, frankly, onboard aircraft, and it is an experiential issue. If you go into a restroom and it's dirty, what's your takeaway from that? Yeah, gross, yuck. Immediately, your experience has diminished in that space. And then more importantly, you step outside of that facility, and if it's dirty outside that facility, what's your next feeling? Indifferent, frustration. They don't care. And if they don't care about the cleanliness of their facility, they certainly are concerned. They're certainly not concerned about my experience. So we focus heavily on the cleanliness of our facility and get tremendous top scores. The interest here is when I told you about that whole change in demographic, the new group of people that were coming through the front door, our facilities were never designed for the amount of traffic that we're pushing through. So we had to come up with a new way. In the terminal facility, that is public space. It's pre-security. So past security, you have an idea of how many people have been generated a boarding pass. You have an idea of how many people are going to be in the concourses. You have no idea what's happening in the terminal facility. Because you have the meters and greeters, you have the employee base, you have individuals that are driving private cars, taxis, et cetera. And it's public space. Anybody that wants to come to the airport, you can't prevent them from coming into the building, right? So the challenge that we had on the restroom front is how do we keep pace? And the traditional pen and paper just wasn't working. Again, we went to the startup market and said, let's try to come up with a solution. Back to the IoT device. Again, clicker size, inanimate object. Inanimate object is the restroom. Simply put the device on the wall and just count how many people are just walking in. The beauty of this system is as it's counting, it's calculating, and via an antenna system, it just pulls all of that data and pushes it to the cloud. And when we hit a particular threshold, pre-designated threshold for us, we push information to a Samsung wearable Gear Watch called TaskWatch. The beauty of this program is now any available housekeeper that's in the area immediately receives information. They receive the detail of how many people have gone into that restroom, and the shot clock starts. So they head into that restroom, and they can immediately, if they have to, refer to a checklist that's on their device and start clearing the challenges. And they can walk out and say, confirmed, closed. And the beauty of all of this is that we get two benefits. Number one, gamification. The opportunity for the employees to engage in who's really top performing and escalating the performance overall for all of our housekeepers. And then number two, the more tangible piece is the core of the experience, you, the customer that's traveling through. How does the restroom perform? Overall, just by deploying this device, we were able to see a 7% bump in our cleanliness scores. And our cleanliness scores were already in the 90% range. So again, delivery on the product and the expectation. The last one is Wiser. Many of us have the voice of the customer surveys. Sometimes it's called survey frustration, right? Survey exhaustion. What are we doing differently to use surveys? I encourage you to look at this organization. Again, another startup place. What we did is went to this startup, sat down and said, tell us about your product. Well, you can ask roughly 20 or so questions in under a minute. Well, wait a minute, how's that work? And pretty impressive. Very simple mobile device immediately. It is a click and play. It's back to actually putting gamification in your hands as the consumer. And it doesn't feel like that you're taking a survey. It feels more like you're playing a game. And immediately what we're able to do is kind of a little bit of a trade-off. In order to hop on the high-speed bandwidth Wi-Fi in the airport, we just simply ask our patrons, could you take a 30-second quiz? So immediately, if you log on to our Wi-Fi, it kicks you over to Wiser. Truly, we're able to demonstrate via dashboard, it's taking under 30 seconds to answer roughly 9 questions, and that includes free-form text information. What we were seeing was astounding. We were getting over 40,000 responses in 2 weeks. 40,000 verifiable responses within 2 weeks, and the wealth of data that was coming from that was phenomenal. A Fortune 500 company would typically struggle to get 3,000 to 4,000 responses in roughly 3 months via the traditional survey method. So it's looking for new tools and new systems. How are we deploying all of this and making it work for the benefit of the consumer? Remember Blip Tract? So this is what we see from a dashboarding perspective. We can see how many people were in the security queue, and immediately from the green threshold line, where were we on the timing and the expectations, and holding TSA accountable for their performance, and really putting decision-making right in their hands, and ultimately delivering on that diminished queue time, that diminished queue wait for our consumer. Again, as I was telling you, with the challenges of our facility, we've totally eliminated that hour-long, hour and 15 wait time. Our typical wait times, on average, are under 11 minutes for general boarding. If you pre-check, and we have the ability to monitor pre-check, that's under 3 minutes. And the benefit of TSA is that they're always changing protocols. We take this system and modify it, and we can also track how they've modified their queue times. So we're watching them, we're giving them information to do a better job in the interest of our mutual customer. On that train device, again, making an inanimate object talk, for the first time, we were able to actually see, because it's under contract maintenance, how is the contractor performing? So it wasn't not necessarily just about the operation of the train and making sure that the customers knew exactly where the train was and could they make an educated decision of do I take the train or do I take the moving walkway? We were actually able to go back to the contractor and see when was the train taken out of service, and was that against our contract plan? And did they take it out during the heartbeat of the day as a dissatisfaction and a disservice to our consumer? So when you see gaps, that's when the train shuts off. And we are able to go back, again, on a timing basis and make sure that we're delivering on the expectation. And then let's look at TaskWatch. This is just a very simplistic dashboard. Again, we're back into the gamification aspect with the employee base and making sure who was the award winner for the day, who was clearing responses, and making sure that we were producing a quality product in the restroom. And then ultimately, what are we doing with all of this data that we're collecting through the Internet of Things? We're taking data and working with other startup companies. This one happens to be Astronomer. The Astronomer environment is, we're going to give you flight feeds, so we know when aircraft are coming and going and landing and taking off and taxiing. We're going to give you weather data, weather historical data to go back and look at time and to forecast forward what's happening. We're going to give you security wait times. We'll give you the bathroom cleanliness scores and data, and pretty much every data that we have available at our fingertips. And we start pulling all of this data and overlapping it. And what are we doing? We're predicting what's going to happen in the future. And if we can predict what happens on a Tuesday in August at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's something that I think all of us that fly in August on Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon will want to know. And as we build that information, we can start pushing that information to the consumer that's interested in receiving it. Now we start talking about that curated experience that we're all shooting for. And via mobile phone or perhaps via a wearable device, we can tell you exactly what's happening. Why is this important for us? Because today's state, we just don't think it's appropriate for an airport of our size, at least, to jump into an app and to try to push content. It's really, frankly, not of any tremendous benefit. Yeah, we have some cool information. We can tell you some things to do, but for the most part, people can figure that out. They can navigate. Where the benefit is do we partner with an airline and say, JetBlue, my friends up front, when JetBlue decides to fly to Cincinnati, we can start providing them content for their consumer to let them know exactly what to anticipate. Last, the impact, back to Wiser. So this is just a snapshot, and I know it's an eye chart, but a couple things that I want to point out. We immediately went back. We asked roughly 9 to 11 questions on this Voice of the Customer survey. And the ask was, tell us where we're doing well, tell us where we're struggling, and predominantly around the security aspect, concessions, really kind of a broad brush. The elements that I want to point to is, number one, they told us our concessions really were weak, and we needed to improve. And while many of us were thinking about, yes, from the food and beverage and dining experience, there are weak points, this told us exactly where we needed to focus. Healthy options, vegetarian, cultural foods, as opposed to the just plain mainstays that you would typically see in an airport space. Now we have tangible data that we can actually go to non-traditional concessionaires and say, we have consumers that are looking for your product. When would you like to establish business with CVG? The other one was we walked you heavily through security. The most critical one, and these are actually the two circles. We'll look to the circle off to the right. That circle off to the right was when we asked, how are we doing with security? The second top performing response was, you're doing everything right. Don't change it. Well, when was the last time you traveled through an airport with security that you thought that they knocked it out of the park? And given the fact of how tall that is, that was pretty mind-blowing. We were able to go back and really kind of pat our friends at the TSA on the back that says, hey, really, the product and the delivery and the approach that we're taking is working. That recipe is working. The other one was, that taller blue one, was simply shorter lines. Well, we all want shorter lines, but when we dug deeper and we started looking at the free-form content, which was the box at the very bottom on the right, when we were looking at the content, it really wasn't shorter lines from a time perspective, it's just shorter lines. We have these zigzag Walt Disney World back and forth. It was more about leveraging the staff that says, look, when we have low capacity, don't make people walk through all of those lines. Shorten them up. Make sure that they have a short track and directly to the head of the line. Ultimately, what are we doing? We're going back to that space, right? We're looking for all of us in this room. We're looking for individuals that are focused on delivering an outstanding customer experience. And when we deliver that outstanding customer experience, as all of us professionals know, what happens? The product improvement goes up, satisfaction goes up, spend goes up. Very, very basic tenets. But we're leveraging IoT in our space to make sure that that works. Thank you so much. Very much enjoyed presenting to you. We'll be around for the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. If you would like to join.
Uh-oh. Kamal's putting me on the dais.
Yes, sir. Please, thank you. Can we have some questions from audience, please? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Brian. It's Lisa Oswald from TravelZoo. On the example that you gave about using the Taskus watch and incenting the housekeeping staff to, pick up highly trafficked bathrooms, other than just the fact that they're participating in this mobile gamification application, what incentives, either financial or otherwise, are tied to those leaders who are performing well on the app?
Sure. Have we deployed the next tier? The next tier, I would very much see some sort of financial reward. The challenge is, for us, is that we're a quasi-government entity, so as far as the presenting of cash becomes, frankly, a challenge. So we are trying to figure out the best approach for really kind of incentivizing the employees to the next level. Here's the oddity, though. Frankly, we started with housekeeping thinking, okay, well, nice pilot project. Let's see what direction this goes. And frankly, I figured, too, out of any organization, they're probably culturally the first one that says, no thanks, this is not going to work. Pleasantly surprised, where within the first 2 to 3 weeks, the amount of feedback that was coming back of, do you understand how much this is helping me? And the expectation of just a traditional pen and paper was really not working. We had no idea the amount of volume that was particularly hitting specific bathrooms. And from that, our own expectations were able to be laid out from just an airport facility maintenance aspect. We all know, for those of us that have responsibilities for cleaning facilities, that the older the facility gets, the more challenging it becomes to make sure that it looks clean. What do you do from a facility aspect? The benefit of this product actually was, now we have a circumstance and a scenario where, as we're getting in more frequently, we're maintaining and we're being on top of it and a lot more proactive. And frankly, there was really kind of a study in human behavior as well. We anticipated that a restroom on ticketing would probably get the heaviest use, simply from the perspective of, well, before I process through security, I'm going to go in and use this restroom. Not the case at all. Actually, it's the men's restroom on baggage claim. And why is that? Again, study in human behavior. Typically what we were seeing is high volume of females as they're getting off the aircraft, immediately hitting the closest restroom. Males were waiting by the time they get to baggage claim because they knew that their bag was going to take roughly 20 to 30 minutes to be picked up. Did you ever think that you would be able to pull information about biology-type scenarios? No. However, we can certainly start designing facilities around that aspect. So pretty crazy. But back to the comment, absolutely looking for what we can do for the next tier for the employees. There's one other implication that I want to share as well. For those of us that are involved in security responsibilities, the next tier or the next iteration of this device is it allows two-way communications. Selfishly, I think radios in the airport space are obnoxious. Every employee is a little bit different. They'll turn the volume up incredibly loud. It's that cacophony of noise in an airport that's not very satisfying. Whereas this device will allow for two-way communication, either verbal or silent. If you think about a security implication, very quickly we can start communicating to employees in a silent mode and making sure that they're safe, number one, and number two, what have they done from a consumer protection perspective in sequestering and getting people out of the facility in a rather rapid and organized manner.
Okay. One last question. Last one.
Thank you. Brian, I never thought we would learn so much about bathrooms at the airport today. I'm Janelle from Uber. I have a question for you actually about the bathrooms. So I know you mentioned they were okay. They were 90 or whatever you said, and you were able to move them up even better. I'm curious how you went about, in essence, building the business case, convincing the powers to be that that was a good investment to spend money on, given that I imagine you probably don't have data at your disposal that says when the bathrooms aren't extra clean, people fly less. But that's the whole idea. I can see where you're going, is creating this experience that makes that the airport of choice. How do you build those individual business cases to help people see that incremental customer experience improvement is there?
Great question. Yeah, not so easy. I think as all of us have a group of individuals, and talking to Liliana earlier, similar circumstance, right? We have the naysayers in an organization. We have the other individuals that are like, yeah, but prove it. And then the third tier, which is who's the executive sponsor? Very fortunate to have a CEO that just created this environment for us on the innovation front that says, go, go, go. If you notice, and we didn't get into a tremendous amount of detail, but as the Chief Innovation Officer, pretty much every forward-facing, passenger-facing, customer-facing product all falls within my wing. I am not an IT guy by trade, so the business case ultimately comes down to 2 points. Number one, here's the concept and the idea that we're thinking about from a customer delivery. And number two, as the individual that's building the device, in this case, TaskWatch, that individual travels quite a bit. So tell me what your experience is and what you would like to see as an individual, not only as a business partner, but as a flying consumer. And how do we build a better product? And all the way back to, did I have to run up and try to get board approval? Absolutely not. The benefit to all of us is the startup community is extremely hungry. I think I shared with some of you earlier this morning, we can absolutely go to the marketplace, find something that's off the shelf, but it doesn't necessarily fit our business. The startup environment, the startup ecosystem has been a tremendous reward for us, where it's just simply an organization that's very hungry, that will develop a product for relatively low dollars, and it becomes shared IP. And then ultimately, we just continue to develop that product even further. And what that has yielded is everything that I've walked you through is a presentation to the board that says, oh my gosh, I had no idea the directional aspirations that we were taking, and not only aspirations, but we're actually going and doing something. So whatever it is that you're doing, Brian, just take your team and keep doing it. So am I fortunate from this standpoint? Absolutely. Is it a blank check? Not quite, but certainly if you develop a few wins with the startup organization, very quickly your organization's attention kind of shifts and says, what can we be doing to do more?
Thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.